turn around and take a look.
Hey everybody, let's check out
first,
some
about the patents.
full
I
conspiration
mentioned this,
therapy.
but let's reiterate it. Hey, this is your host, Isaac. Long story short, I've got an ebook for you to get for free. Go to gumroad.com/IsaacW or hit the link in the show notes. The book is called The Vaccine Conspiracy. It goes through all of the information on the multi-part series on this podcast. You can get it for free. Just punch $0 in. Please take it for free. You can donate if you want, support the cause. I appreciate that. But by all means, I just want you to get the information so you can take charge of your own health, because I don't get too passionate about certain things, even vaccines themselves. Like, do I question their safety and efficacy? Absolutely. I don't believe that at all. But like, what I am very passionate about is that Big Pharma does not desire to keep you healthy. They want you to be sick. So just get in the practice of researching for yourself. So go check it out. The ebook is at gumroad.com/IsaacW. Jonas Salk. You will find that this quote-unquote hero of modern medicine refused to patent. He said, patenting the sun, it's people. Well, turns out he would have patented if he was allowed to, but there was too much public funding behind it, and he couldn't do it. He looked into it. Tried to do it, and found out he couldn't, and then he acted like, well, it's for the people. And that patent should actually got $7 billion with a B. Now, the vaccines, they can have patents. They can. In fact, there's so many patents out there for vaccines. Guess how much it's worth? $61 billion. And to put that in perspective, because, it's all funny money numbers. I don't know what that looks like. Bill Gates is worth $104 billion, and he's like the world's richest man. So big money. If you owned all the vaccines patents, you could be almost as rich as Bill Gates. Let's talk about Jonas Salk. Who is Jonas Salk? Well, he's the guy who gave us the polio vaccine. There was a few of them that tried. He's the one that made the cut, apparently. Even though he gave everybody monkey diseases. And then Hillary Kaprowski gave everybody monkey AIDS. Totally worth it. Salk wrote a book called The Survival of the Wisest. Now, truth be told, I can't find a copy of this thing. Jay Dyer did a piece on it, though. The great Jay Dyer, friend of the show here. From what I've heard and what I've read, again, this isn't firsthand. Usually I firsthand most of the stuff as much as I can. Couldn't even find a PDF online. The book lays out a philosophical attitude of scientific dogma that only the wisest should be guiding humanity. The wisest, most enlightened through their knowledge of science needs to guide humanity. That the greatness of science and technology will allow man to live longer. Immortality. But the problem with that is that you now have problems with overpopulation. So it's quite the humdinger. Now, Jonas Salk, turns out, he worked for your boy, the Rockefellers, arguably the American branch of the Rothschild, depending on how crazy you want to. Most powerful more than the Kardashians. And he owned all the oil refineries. That's what Rockefeller is the one behind all of our medicine. How do you get from oil and banking to caring about people? I don't know. I don't know how to do that, but they did it. So you got to go back to the early 1900s. We just started to learn how to wash our hands. A lot of people thought that was for sissies and they didn't get it. But in the early 1900s, we had all these weird snake oil salesmen out there, and there were all these healers, people channeling crazy spirits. And John Gibbard the Rockefeller teamed up with another monopoly man, Carnegie, who had a monopoly on steel. And what they elitists did, they funded a guy named Abraham Flexner to create what they call the Flexner Report. And this Flexner Report basically presented the idea that American medical schools needed to be more selective, have stricter protocols, more science, more, what do you call it when everyone does the same thing? Standardization? Yeah, more standardization. How fun is that? So Flexner, it's like a good wrestling name too. Abraham Flexner. He studied education in America. Had nothing to do with medicine, but he studied the education system in America. So his report was the foundation for what would become the overhauling of medicine in Western civilization. And as a result, it closed down tons of medical schools because they didn't make the grade. They didn't make the cut of what they deemed appropriate. Who's they? It's, again, Abraham Flexner, Carnegie, and Rockefeller. Ruinous capitalists, all of a sudden, are who we look to for medical knowledge. So Abraham Flexner, was this guy a doctor? Nope. Didn't even have a PhD. He had a Bachelor's of Arts in the Classics. Turned out he was racist too, which is pretty common back then. I'll give you that. Even H.P. Lovecraft said it's racist stuff. You heard my H.P. Lovecraft show many weeks ago. And just for example, and I know this is like some social justice warrior virtue signaling to talk about how people 100 years ago were racist. Like, yeah, duh. But the Flexner Report, Chapter 14, it says the medical education of the Negro. It says how the Negro needs to learn hygiene because they're so dirty, and they need it. They need to protect the white race. It's so crazy, the white race, pure, clean snow. They say in the book. This is what Flexner says. The guy, again, part of the unholy trio of people that made modern medicine here, says the Negro must be educated not only for his sake, but for ours. The pioneer work in educating the race to know and to practice fundamental hygienic principles must be done largely by the Negro doctor and the Negro nurse. The Negro needs good schools rather than many schools, schools to which the more promising of the race can be sent to receive a substantial education in which hygiene rather than surgery. So who's Flexner? He was a racist art student who was successful in helping the Rockefellers and the Carnegie shut down a ton of medical schools, funded by these monopoly men capitalists, in order to get medical science more centralized, because that was the goal. That was the idea behind it. Believe you me, Rockefellers and Carnegies don't do things. The medical doctrine, success, natural healing ideas, because they wanted to make sure they could invest in big pharma right off the get-go. Big pharma was birthed and the drugs were the way forward. So what they did was, back then, they knew of all these herbs that would, cure these ailments. And instead of using the herbs, they recreated them in labs with the synthetic patented drugs. And you know who owned that? Who owned the drugs, right? If you can get behind shutting down, if hemp, if the THC in marijuana is a natural cure, then they're finding a way to, synthesize that in a lab and give you a pill form that they are behind the investment. Because otherwise you could just go get it on your own and not pay them. People are psychopaths and they gotta try to drain you dry. Now, in conclusion, on this Rockefeller talk. In conclusion, the elites who were obsessed with money through big oil and the banking industries, the ones that controlled all these industries, were less sudden. They cared about the health of their fellow Americans. Meanwhile, they're killing union leaders and all this stuff. I don't know that for a fact, but you know it's true. I don't know if it's... I'm just saying that. I'm probably right, though, honestly. But, there was big battles between the unions. They tried to make people work like 100 hours a week or whatever it was back then. And it wasn't until the unions fought for that 40-hour work week that we all take for granted. But these same insane people, they funded the startup of the big pharma system. So the Rockefellers are very tied into all this. Whether you want to believe they were helping us or not is up to you.
Okay, here I can do. Okay.
But Jonas Salk. Okay, let's rehash the loop. How did we get there? Oh yeah, because Jonas Salk worked for the Rockefellers, for the foundation. Jonas Salk, he went down in history as the savior of science, but he was also a philosopher. Yes. I'm sure him and the Rockefeller family had some conversation, some ideas about human evolution.
No. Give me 5 and I give you change.
Thought we could only save ourselves science and wisdom. Wisdom, of course, the key term here. That's to the serpent, the Luciferian knowledge. It says the alternative is the death of everyone on the planet. Using evolutionary ideas of wisdom and knowledge increases every generation. And he asserts that a greater force is emerging to push this. What's that greater force? Talking about the wisdom. I know what that force is. The evil promotes the good, and the two together, such that evil is corrected by the good. That's what he says. I'm going to play evil promotes good, and the two go together, such that evil is corrected by good. Evolution is error-making and error-correcting, and he defines himself as a bio-philosopher.
Well, I think we are being both wise and unwise. And as I said in another one of my writings, which I spoke about the survival of the wisest as distinct from the survival of the fit, I said that I thought wisdom had become the new basis of fitness. And at a time such as the present, in which the future is very much in our own hands, as to whether we will destroy ourselves and the planet, or whether we will use science and technology and the knowledge that we possess for better rather than for worse, so to speak. Now, I have the impression that the new generation of young people are coming upon the scene with a sense of ancestorhood and with more wisdom at an earlier age than was evident before. I think this comes about as a matter of necessity, almost as if there is something innate, something in us that is destined for a longer term rather than a shorter term future. And I think that many of the things that are happening, that arise in the public domain, in which we are saying intuitively, there's something wrong, and something has to be done to correct it. We wish that our leaders would listen.
Yet it seems to me that in recent years, in the past generation, there has been a rejection of that concept of ancestry or ancestorhood.
It seems that way, and it's for that very reason that I think it's emerging now with greater strength and greater force. So that it is as if evil, in a sense, evokes good. So that the two, which we know go together, it is as if when things get bad enough, then something happens to correct the course. And it's for that reason that I speak about evolution as an error-making and an error-correcting process. And if we can be ever so much better, ever so much slightly better at error-correcting than error-making,